Imagine a wedding feast. Laughter echoes, wine flows freely. The air is thick with joy and celebration. Then the doors splinter open, and they storm in. Not men, not beasts, but a horrifying fusion of both. From the waist up, they are muscular, bearded men, their faces twisted in savage grins. But below the torso, where legs should be, is the powerful, four-legged body of a horse. Hoofs crash against the stone floor. Their eyes burn with a primal hunger, and they are drunk. For the first time in their lives, they have tasted wine, and it has uncorked a fury buried in their unnatural blood. This is the moment civilization breaks. This is the arrival of the Centaurs. But before we witness the unspeakable violence that followed, we have to ask a question that has haunted biologists and mythologists for centuries. A question that seems simple, but unravels the very possibility of their existence. How does a centaur work? Look closer at this impossible anatomy. It has the torso of a man, which contains a human heart, human lungs, a human stomach. Fused to this is the massive body of a horse, which must contain its own heart, its own lungs, its own digestive tract. Does a centaur have two hearts? For lungs? Two separate digestive systems? Think about it. If it eats with its human mouth, the food would travel down a human esophagus into a human stomach. But that small stomach could never power the massive half-ton body of a horse. It would need to eat constantly, grazing for 16 hours a day just to stay alive. But how would it do that? Bend its human torso down to the ground, awkwardly stuffing grass into its mouth? The entire creature is a biological paradox, a living contradiction. And the answer to this paradox is not found in biology, but in the terrifying story of their creation. A story of divine lust, betrayal, and a mad king who dared to challenge the gods. Unlocking that story is the key to understanding not just how they lived, but why their name became a synonym for pure, untamable chaos. The ancient Greeks didn't just invent monsters for fun. Their myths were warnings, allegories for the darkest parts of human nature. And the centaur is perhaps their most profound creation. It is the ultimate symbol of the war within us all. The struggle between our rational, civilized mind and the violent, animalistic beast that lurks just beneath the surface. They were a walking, breathing embodiment of that conflict. But to truly grasp their horror, we must go back to their father, a man so arrogant, so consumed by hubris, that he committed a crime so vile even the gods were shocked. His name was Chiron, king of the Lapis. He was a man who had everything, but it wasn't enough. His defining sin was ambition married to treachery. He murdered his own father-in-law by pushing him into a pit of burning coals, a crime so heinous that no mortal ritual could cleanse him of its stain. He became an outcast, hunted by the Furies, driven to the edge of madness. But in a moment of pity, the king of the gods himself, Zeus, decided to intervene. He brought Chiron up to Mount Olympus, purified him of his crime, and welcomed him to feast at the table of the gods. This was an unprecedented act of mercy. A mortal dining on ambrosia, drinking nectar, living among the immortals. But Chiron's soul was rotten to the core. Instead of gratitude, he felt only lust. And he fixed his gaze upon Zeus's own wife, the queen of the gods, Hera. He began to desire her, to plot her seduction, right under the nose of the all-powerful god who had just saved his life. The sheer audacity is almost impossible to comprehend. But Zeus saw everything. Enraged by this ultimate betrayal, he decided to set a trap. He would give Chiron exactly what he wanted, but in a way that would seal his doom. Zeus gathered the clouds, molding and shaping a phantom in the perfect image of his wife, Hera. This cloud clone, named Nephili, was a perfect replica, beautiful and divine. Zeus then sent this illusion to Chiron's bedchambers. Blinded by his arrogance and lust, Chiron never suspected a thing. He coupled with the cloud, believing he had successfully deceived the king of the gods and conquered his queen. In that moment of supreme blasphemy, a new race was conceived. Nephili, the cloud, was sent to the mountains of Thessaly, where she gave birth to a single monstrous son, Centaurus. This creature was a twisted mockery of life, and he grew up wild and alone on Mount Pelion. He found no solace with humans nor with animals. So he mated with the wild Magnesian Maras of the mountain, and from this cursed union, the entire race of centaurs was born. Think about what this origin means. They are not creatures of nature. They are not a part of the natural order. They are born from a lie. They are the product of a mortal's unthinkable arrogance and a god's cold, calculated revenge. Their very DNA is woven from deception, betrayal, and a lust that defied the heavens. Is it any wonder, then, that they were a race defined by their lack of control? They were outcasts from the moment of their conception, forever caught between two worlds, belonging to neither. Too intelligent to be simple beasts, but too savage and impulsive to ever be truly human. They grew up in the caves and forests of Mount Pelion, a wild tribe living on the borders of the civilized world. And ironically, their closest neighbors were the Lapiths, the very people once ruled by their accursed father, Chiron. The Centaurs and the Lapiths were, in a twisted way, cousins. One branch of the family tree embraced law, society, and reason. The other embraced chaos, instinct, and violence. For a time, a tense peace existed between them. But it was a fragile peace, a powder keg waiting for a single spark. That spark came in the form of a wedding invitation. The new king of the Lapiths, Pirithous, who was in fact a son of Ixion and thus the Centaur's half-brother, was getting married. In a gesture of goodwill, or perhaps foolish naivety, he invited his wild, half-horse cousins to the wedding feast. This was a catastrophic error in judgment. The Centaurs had lived their entire lives in the wilderness, eating raw meat and drinking water from streams. They had never tasted the one substance that could completely dissolve the thin veil of their humanity, wine. At the feast, they were served wine in great silver horns. They drank it not by the cup, but by the gallon, guzzling it down like water. The fermented grape was a poison to their hybrid nature. The alcohol ignited the violent legacy of their father, Ixion, and extinguished the last embers of their reason. Their human faces contorted, their eyes glazed over with pure, animalistic desire. The laughter in the hall died, replaced by a tense silence as the Lapith guests watched their half-beast relatives transform. The centaur Eurytion, his mind completely consumed by drunken rage and lust, suddenly lunged across the table. He seized the bride Hippodamia, throwing her over his powerful equine back, intending to drag her away and violate her. The sight of their leader's brazen act was like a signal. Instantly, every other centaur erupted. They overturned tables, smashed craters of wine, and grabbed the Lapith women, their human hands pulling and tearing at dresses while their horse hooves kicked and trampled everything in their path. The wedding feast descended into a bloody, chaotic brawl for survival. The great Centauromachi, the war against the centaurs, had begun. The Lapith men, including the legendary hero Theseus who was a guest at the wedding, drew their swords. They fought with chairs, with table legs, with bronze vases, anything they could find. What happened next was not a battle, but a slaughter, a brutal explosion of the conflict that had been brewing since a mad king first laid eyes on a cloud. It became one of the most foundational stories in all of Western civilization, a story so important it was carved into the very marble of the Parthenon in Athens. Because this was more than a wedding brawl. It was the ultimate metaphor for the eternal war for the soul of humanity itself. The stage for this war was not a battlefield, but a wedding hall. The wedding of Pirithous, king of the Lapiths, a proud tribe of men from the mountains of Thessaly. His bride was the beautiful Hippodamia. This was meant to be a celebration of union, a symbol of peace. And in a grand gesture of diplomacy, Pirithous invited his neighbors, his half-brothers, the Centaurs. It was a risky move. The Lapiths were men of cities, of laws, of cultivated fields. The Centaurs were children of the wild forests, creatures of instinct and untamed strength. But they shared a common ancestor, and Pirithous hoped this marriage feast would forge a lasting alliance. Imagine the scene. A great hall, filled with the light of torches and the sound of music. Tables groan under the weight of roasted meats and fresh bread. The Lapith warriors, clean and dressed in fine tunics, sit alongside their centaur cousins. The sheer physical presence of the centaurs must have been overwhelming. For powerful legs shifting on the stone floor, muscular human torsos towering over the tables, their long hair and beards tangled and wild. An uneasy truce hangs in the air, thick with the smell of wine and wood smoke. For the Greeks, wine was a gift from the gods, but it was also a test. It was the mark of a civilized man to drink wine mixed with water, to enjoy its pleasures with restraint and moderation. To drink it pure, unmixed, was the act of a barbarian. It was to surrender your reason to raw, animalistic impulse. And the centaurs, unfamiliar with this potent symbol of human culture, drank the wine pure. They drank it deep from massive craters, letting the dark, unwatered liquid fuel the wildness in their blood. At first it was just loud talk and crude jokes, but as the wine flowed, the thin veneer of civility began to crack. The centaurs' laughter grew harsh, their eyes glazed over with the primal fire. They were no longer guests, they were predators. And then it happened, the breaking point, the spark that ignited the inferno. Eurytion, the most powerful and arrogant of the centaurs, laid his eyes on the bride Hippodamia. In his wine-addled mind, all thoughts of honor, of kinship, of sacred hospitality vanished. He saw only something he wanted to take. He lunged. In a horrifying instant, the celebration shattered. Eurytion seized the bride, his powerful hands grabbing her, his horse body knocking over tables and sending guests sprawling. He tried to drag her from the hall, intending to violate her right there. Her screams echoed off the walls, a sound of pure terror that cut through the drunken haze. And in that moment, the feast became a slaughterhouse. This was more than just a drunken brawl. This was the ultimate sacrilege. In ancient Greece, the laws of hospitality, known as xenia, were sacred. A host was obligated to protect his guest, and a guest was obligated to honor his host. To harm your host or to defile his home was an offense against the gods themselves. Eurytion's act wasn't just an assault on a woman. It was an assault on the very foundations of civilization. It was a declaration that the laws of gods and men meant nothing. Pirithous, the groom, roared with fury. He leaped at Eurytion, not with a sword, but with the first thing he could grab, a heavy, ornate wine vessel. He smashed it against the centaur's head, but it was too late. The other centaurs, their own bloodlust ignited by Eurytion's example, turned on the other Lapith women. The hall erupted into pure chaos. Men shouting, women screaming, the monstrous forms of the centaurs rearing and kicking, their hooves striking sparks on the stone. The Lapiths were caught off guard, but they were warriors. They fought back with whatever they could find. They ripped legs from tables to use as clubs. They hurled bronze bowls and heavy plates. They fought with the ingenuity of men against the brute force of beasts. But the centaurs were a force of nature. They were stronger, heavier, a terrifying fusion of man and animal. They trampled men under their hooves. They used massive stone hearths and even uprooted trees as weapons, their animal rage giving them inhuman strength. The battle, later called the Centauromachi, became a desperate, bloody struggle for survival. It was a chaotic swirl of violence. A Lapith warrior named Crantor was cornered. A centaur named Demolion ripped a massive wooden chest from the wall and hurled it, crushing Crantor's face and chest, pinning his soul to his bones. Another centaur grabbed a man named Gryneus and gouged out his eyes with his bare hands before impaling him on a set of stag antlers mounted on the wall. The brutality was absolute. But the Lapiths had an ace up their sleeve. At the head table, sitting beside his best friend Pirithous, was the greatest hero of Athens, Theseus, the man who had slain the Minotaur in the labyrinth of Crete. Theseus was the living embodiment of heroic order. He was the champion of reason against monstrous chaos. And when the chaos erupted, he did not hesitate. While others scrambled, Theseus met the violence head-on. He seized a giant bronze cauldron, a masterpiece of art, and swung it like a mace, bringing it down on the head of the centaur Biener. He didn't just strike him. The story says he shattered his skull, splattering his brains across the floor. He then vaulted onto the centaur's back, a man riding the man-beast, and drove his sword down through its spine. Theseus became a whirlwind of destruction, a focal point of human resistance in the storm of bestial fury. He was fighting not just for his friends but for the principle they represented. Every centaur he cut down was a blow against the unthinking, violent impulses that lurk beneath the surface of the world. He saw a centaur named Dictys, stumbling backward from a blow, slip and impale himself on an ash spear he himself had broken. Theseus saw this, and according to the poet Ovid, he said aloud, "May you not find your death so cheaply," before hurling a new spear that pierced the centaur through the temple. The presence of a hero like Theseus shifted the balance. It gave the Lapiths hope. It showed them that these monstrous creatures could be fought, that they could be killed. The fight spilled out of the great hall and into the courtyards, under the cold light of the moon. The wedding feast had become a war zone, a microcosm of the eternal struggle. On one side, the Lapiths representing law, marriage, society, and the rational control of one's desires. On the other, the Centaurs representing lawlessness, lust, chaos, and the surrender to one's most primal instincts. This is why the Greeks carved this story onto the Parthenon, their most sacred temple. It was a constant reminder, etched in stone, of the fragility of their own civilization. It was a warning that the beast is always there, right at the border, sometimes even invited inside as a guest. And that if you are not vigilant, if you let your guard down for even a moment, it will try to drag your bride into the darkness and trample your world to dust. The battle raged on, hour after hour. Men and centaurs fell, their blood mixing on the stone floors. But the centaurs' initial drunken rage was now being met by the cold, determined fury of men defending their homes, their families, and their very way of life. The tide was beginning to turn, but the cost was staggering. And in the heart of the chaos, the two leaders, King Pirithous and the centaur Eurytion, were locked in a death struggle that would decide not just the fate of the wedding, but the very definition of humanity itself. Eurytion roared, a sound more animal than man, his breath a foul wave of undigested wine and pure rage. He lunged, not with a weapon but with his bare hands, aiming to crush the king's throat. But Pirithous was a king of the heroic age. He was no stranger to violence. He sidestepped the clumsy, drunken charge, and as the centaur's massive torso thundered past, the king brought a heavy ceremonial wine crater, a massive bronze bowl, crashing down on the back of Eurytion's equine skull. The sound was a sickening crack, a wet thud that momentarily silenced the chaos. Eurytion shuddered, his human eyes rolling back, and he collapsed, a twitching mountain of flesh and fury, brought down not by a hero's sword, but by an instrument of the very celebration he had defiled. But one dead centaur did not end a war. Started one. Seeing their leader fall, the other centaurs abandoned all pretense of being guests. They were a force of nature unleashed. They tore burning branches from the hearths to use as clubs. They ripped stone altars from their foundations, hefting them like boulders. This wasn't a battle, it was a riot, a stampede, a complete breakdown of order. The Lapith men, caught off guard, scrambled for their own weapons, but they were hopelessly outnumbered and outmatched in sheer brute strength. For every centaur one of them managed to spear, another would trample 3 more men under its hooves. The wedding feast had become a slaughterhouse, and in the middle of it all stood Theseus. The great hero of Athens, the slayer of the Minotaur, had come as a guest, a friend to the groom. Now he was a warrior. He moved with a deadly grace that seemed impossible amidst the carnage. While others panicked, Theseus saw the battlefield. He saw the patterns in the chaos. He parried a blow from a centaur wielding a whole table as a shield, then drove his sword deep into its exposed flank. He became a whirlwind of bronze and courage, a bulwark against the tide of savagery. His presence was a rallying cry. Seeing the hero Theseus fighting with such ferocity, the Lapith men found their courage again. They weren't just victims anymore. They were defenders of their homes, their families, their very way of life. They formed a shield wall around the women, a desperate, bristling circle of spears against a tidal wave of hooves and muscle. The battle raged, a series of brutal, desperate duels. One centaur, named Biener, made the fatal mistake of letting a Lapith warrior leap onto his back. The man, clinging to Biener's hair, drove his sword down again and again into the creature's spine, riding the dying beast as it bucked and screamed. Another centaur, Dictys, slipped on the blood-soaked floor while fleeing Theseus and was impaled on a sharpened ash tree stump, his body writhing in a grotesque parody of his own violent nature. But the centaurs were not just mindless beasts. They had their own heroes, their own tragedies. Among them was the handsome Silurus, his golden hair flowing down his human shoulders, his equine body a perfect, powerful black. He fought with incredible skill, but a Lapith spear, thrown from a distance, found its mark, piercing his chest just below the neck. He fell, and his lover, the beautiful centauride Hylonomy, rushed to his side. She cradled his head, trying to staunch the bleeding with her hands, whispering to him, trying to breathe her own life back into his lips. But it was too late. Seeing him gone, she took the same spear that had killed him, and with one final grief-stricken cry, threw herself upon it, joining him in death. In the midst of this war between civilization and chaos, there was a love story as tragic as any human's, a stark reminder that the line between man and monster is never as clear as we want it to be. The greatest warrior on the Lapith side, however, wasn't Pirithous or even Theseus. It was Ceneus. Ceneus had a secret. He was born a woman, Canis, so beautiful that the sea god Poseidon had forced himself upon her. Afterwards, filled with remorse, the god offered her any gift she desired. Ashamed and enraged, she asked to be transformed into a man, a warrior who could never be violated again. And Poseidon granted her wish with a bonus. He made Sinus' skin invulnerable to any sword or spear. In the battle, Sinus was an unstoppable force. He cut down centaur after centaur. Their weapons, their claws, their fists, nothing could pierce his skin. He was a walking embodiment of human defiance. The centaurs, panicked and enraged by this invincible man, fell back. Their leader, Latreus, a giant among his kind, mocked Sinus, calling him a woman trying to break his spirit. But Sinus just smiled, and with a single thrust of his sword, ended the taunts forever. The centaurs realized they could not wound him, but they could still bury him. In a terrifying display of coordinated brute force, they changed tactics. They stopped trying to cut him and started throwing things at him. First rocks, then logs, then entire uprooted pine trees. They swarmed him, not with weapons, but with the very forest itself. Sinus struggled under the impossible weight. His invulnerable skin no defense against the crushing pressure of a mountain of timber. The Lapiths watched in horror as their greatest champion was slowly, methodically, buried alive. He suffocated under the weight of the wild world he fought to tame. A man literally pushed back into the earth by the forces of chaos. The legend says that from the mound of trees, a golden-winged bird emerged and flew away, his soul finally freed. The death of Sinus was a devastating blow, but it was also the centaurs' last great act of fury. They had spent their rage. They had thrown everything they had at the Lapiths. And now, seeing the tide turning, seeing the organized, disciplined fury of Theseus and the remaining Lapith warriors, they broke. The roar of battle turned into the thunder of retreat. They fled the wedding hall, fled the city, and scattered into the mountains of Thessaly, leaving behind a scene of unimaginable destruction. The hall was a ruin of splintered tables, shattered pottery, and fallen heroes. The floor was slick with a ghastly mixture of wine and blood. King Pirithous stood with his friend Theseus, surveying the carnage. He had won. He had defended his bride, his people, his laws. Civilization had triumphed over savagery. But as he looked at the bodies of his friends, at the face of the invincible Sinus who now lay beneath a pile of trees, at the tragic forms of the centaur lovers Hylonomy and Silurus, the victory felt hollow. He had proven that man was not a beast. But to do it, he had to become a killer, presiding over a wedding that had become a funeral. The centaurs were driven out, banished to the wild places of the world. But the battle had revealed a terrifying truth. That same wildness, that same capacity for brutal violence, wasn't just in the heart of the centaurs. It was in the heart of man too, just waiting for an invitation to the feast. The war was over, but the question it raised would haunt humanity forever. What truly separates the wedding guest from the wild animal? That question, what separates us from the animal, is the razor's edge upon which all of civilization is built. The Greeks believed the answer was self-control, reason over instinct, law over chaos, and the centaurs, with their wild, drunken rampage, became the perfect symbol for the failure of that control. They became the poster children for the monster lurking just beneath the skin, a cautionary tale whispered in nurseries and etched into temples. This is what happens when you let the beast take over. This is the consequence of surrendering to your baser nature. But what if that story is incomplete? What if, among the thundering hooves and savage cries, there was another kind of centaur? One who didn't just fail to be human, but who, in some ways, managed to surpass humanity itself. One who proved that the union of man and horse wasn't a curse, but a gateway to a wisdom that no mere mortal could ever hope to achieve. To find him, we have to leave the blood-soaked floors of the wedding feast and travel to the serene slopes of Mount Pelion, because this is the home of Chiron. Now, the name Chiron might not be as immediately recognizable as Hercules or Achilles, but in the world of Greek myth, he is the linchpin. He is the teacher, the mentor, the guide who shaped nearly every great hero you've ever heard of. And the first thing you need to understand about him is that he was not like the others. His bloodline was entirely different. The common centaurs, the ones who crashed the wedding, were born of Ixion's madness and a cloud. They were a race born from delusion and lust. Chiron was the son of a Titan. His father was Cronus, the king of the Titans, the father of Zeus himself. His mother was the beautiful ocean nymph Philyra. The story goes that Cronus, desiring Philyra, transformed himself into a stallion to pursue her. Their union produced a child unlike any other, half-divine titan, half-immortal nymph, in the shape of a centaur. He was not a mistake. He was the offspring of gods. This lineage set him apart from the very beginning. Where his cousins were driven by base instinct, Chiron was gifted with the divine intellect. Where they were known for their savagery, he was known for his profound gentleness and wisdom. He was the great exception, the living proof that what you are made of does not have to define who you are. And so, the greatest kings and queens of Greece, when their sons came of age, did not send them to the finest academies in Athens or Sparta. They sent them to a cave on the side of a mountain, to be taught by a creature that the rest of the world considered a monster. Think about the sheer gravity of that. Imagine the trust it would take to hand your child, the heir to your kingdom, over to a half-horse, half-man living in the wilderness. But they did it, because Chiron's reputation was legendary. His list of students reads like a hall of fame for Greek mythology. He taught Jason, the leader of the Argonauts, how to lead men and navigate the treacherous seas on his quest for the Golden Fleece. He raised the boy from infancy, shaping him into a king. He taught the legendary hunter Actaeon, the master of the chase. He taught Patroclus, the beloved companion of Achilles. But his most famous students were two of the biggest names in the entire Greek pantheon, the god of medicine and the world's greatest warrior. Asclepius, the son of Apollo, was brought to Chiron to learn the healing arts. Chiron didn't just teach him about herbs and poultices. He taught him the secrets of life and death itself. He taught him medicine, botany, and surgery with a skill so profound that Asclepius would eventually become the Greek god of healing, a figure so skilled he could even raise the dead. The knowledge that founded Western medicine, in the world of myth, flowed from the mind of a centaur. And then there was Achilles, the unstoppable warrior, the hero of the Trojan War. When we think of Achilles, we think of rage and martial prowess. But Chiron taught him more than just how to wield a spear and shield. He taught Achilles how to play the lyre, how to sing. He taught him ethics, philosophy, and compassion. He understood that to create a true hero, you had to train the soul as much as the body. He was trying to temper the warrior's fire with the artist's heart. He was trying to ensure that the most dangerous man in the world was also a good one. Chiron's wisdom stemmed from his unique nature. He was the perfect bridge between two worlds. His human torso housed a brilliant, civilized mind, capable of understanding poetry, science, and philosophy. But his equine body kept him forever connected to the natural world. He understood the rhythm of the seasons, the language of the beasts, the secrets of the earth in a way no human ever could. He wasn't a man trying to dominate nature, nor was he a beast running wild within it. He was a perfect synthesis of both. He embodied a harmony that humanity was, and still is, desperately searching for. He represented the ideal, the dream of what humanity could be if it could only balance its intellect with its instinct. But this is Greek mythology, and in Greek mythology, even the best and brightest are subject to the cruel whims of fate. Chiron's story, for all its wisdom and nobility, ends in one of the most profound tragedies in all of ancient lore. It happened, as so many tragedies did, during one of the labors of Hercules. Hercules, another of Chiron's former students and dear friends, was fighting a group of the other centaurs, the wild, savage kind. During the battle, Hercules fired his arrows, which he had tipped with the impossibly lethal poison of the Lernaean hydra. One stray arrow, a moment of tragic miscalculation, flew through the chaos and struck Chiron in the knee. Now, under normal circumstances, this would be a problem for Chiron the master healer to solve. But the hydra's venom was a poison from the primordial age. It was absolute. There was no cure. Not even for the god of medicine, Asclepius, let alone his teacher. And here is the cruelest twist of all. Chiron was immortal. The son of Cronus could not die. The wound would not kill him, but the poison caused him unending, excruciating pain. The greatest healer in the world was afflicted with an incurable wound, and the greatest gift of the gods, his immortality, had just become his eternal curse. He was trapped in an agony from which there was no escape, not by medicine and not by death. Can you imagine a more horrific fate? To possess all the knowledge of healing, yet be unable to apply it to yourself, to long for the sweet release of death, but to be denied it by your very nature. For years, the wise old centaur suffered, his wisdom overshadowed by a constant grinding pain. His salvation, when it finally came, was the ultimate expression of his character. It was an act of profound sacrifice. At that time, the Titan Prometheus was also suffering an eternal punishment for giving fire to mankind. He was chained to a rock, where an eagle would eat his liver every day, only for it to grow back to be eaten again the next. Zeus had decreed that Prometheus could only be freed if an immortal would willingly give up their immortality and take his place in the underworld, the realm of the dead. Chiron, seeing a chance to end his own suffering and save a benefactor of humanity, volunteered. He made a deal with the gods. He would lay down his eternal life, surrendering it to the void, in exchange for Prometheus's freedom. It was an act of ultimate compassion, choosing to cease to exist so that another could live free. Zeus, moved by this noble sacrifice, would not allow such a great soul to simply vanish into nothingness. As Chiron died, finally released from his pain, the king of the gods took him and placed him among the stars as a constellation, so that the world would never forget the wise and noble centaur. To this day, you can look up into the night sky and see him there. The constellation Sagittarius, the archer, or by some accounts Centaurus, a permanent reminder that even in a race defined by its wildness, there can exist a nobility that outshines the greatest of human heroes. Chiron proved that the two halves, man and beast, could exist in perfect harmony. He was the exception, the ideal. But his tragic end, and his selfless choice to die, leaves us with a chilling question. If this was the fate of the best of them, a life of wisdom ending in agonizing pain and a sacrificial death, what hope could there possibly be for the rest? His story was a shining light, but it was a solitary one. And as the age of myth wore on, the world of men was becoming less and less tolerant of the shadows where the wild things lived. The final brutal war for survival was coming, and it would not be a war of equals. The stage for this final conflict wouldn't be a windswept battlefield or a desolate mountain pass. It would be a wedding feast. The setting itself was a symbol of the new world dawning, a world of order, of society, of vows and alliances. Pirithous, king of the Lapiths, a tribe of men renowned for their valor and their horse-taming skills, was to be married. His bride was the beautiful Hippodamia. In a gesture of goodwill, a fragile olive branch extended between civilization and the wild, Pirithous invited his half-brothers, the Centaurs, to the celebration. They were, after all, relatives, both descended from the line of Ixion. It was a chance to bridge the chasm that had always separated them, to share a table not as rivals but as kin. For a time the peace held. The Centaurs, awkward and out of place amidst the structured finery of the Lapith court, marveled at the cooked meats, the music, the laughter. But then came the wine. To the Lapiths it was a social lubricant, a symbol of celebration and refinement. To the Centaurs, who typically drank only water and milk, the potent, fermented grape was a poison. It was a fire that ignited the basest parts of their nature, burning away the thin veneer of civility they had adopted for the feast. The structured world of the wedding hall began to blur, its rules melting away in the alcoholic haze. Their instincts, so long suppressed by the forest's solitude, now roared to the surface, amplified and distorted. The tipping point came with a single horrifying act. Eurytion, the most powerful and brutish of the Centaurs, his eyes clouded with drunken lust, lunged for the bride. He seized Hippodamia, intending to drag her away, to claim her as a prize in a conquest born of impulse and intoxication. In that moment, the truce was not just broken. It was shattered into a million pieces. Seeing their leader's brazen act, the other Centaurs followed suit. A wave of chaos crashed over the celebration as they grabbed at the Lapith women and boys. Their joyous feast instantly transformed into a scene of brutal violation and terror. The Lapith men, stunned for only a heartbeat, responded with a fury that matched the Centaurs' own. The wedding hall became a slaughterhouse. There were no battle lines, no organized formations. It was a desperate, swirling melee of survival. The air, once filled with music, now rang with the clash of bronze, the splintering of wood, the screams of the terrified and the guttural roars of the enraged. Men, caught without their swords and spears, ripped legs from tables to use as clubs. They smashed heavy wine amphorae over the Centaurs' heads, the dark red liquid mixing with even darker blood on the marble floors. And fighting alongside King Pirithous was his closest friend, a man who was no stranger to battling monsters, the legendary hero Theseus, slayer of the Minotaur. Theseus was the embodiment of heroic order, a man who ventured into the dark places of the world to impose the logic and justice of civilization. Seeing the monstrous nature of the Centaurs unleashed, he waded into the fray without hesitation. He was not just defending his friend's wedding, he was defending the very idea of a world where such a wedding could exist, a world where law triumphed over lawlessness. The fight was a gruesome spectacle of mismatched strengths. The Centaurs had the advantage of mass, of raw power. Their hooves were lethal weapons, capable of crushing a man's skull with a single kick. Their powerful arms could snap a spine or tear a limb from its socket. But the Lapiths had agility, teamwork, and a desperate intelligence born of necessity. They ducked under the Centaurs' clumsy swings, using their smaller size to their advantage. They worked in pairs, one distracting a centaur while another hamstrung its powerful equine legs, bringing the creature crashing to the ground. Theseus, a master of combat, was a whirlwind of destruction. He saw Eurytion, the instigator, still struggling with the terrified Hippodamia. He grabbed a massive bronze cauldron, heavy with wine, and with a hero's strength, he brought it down on Eurytion's head. The centaur collapsed, his skull caved in, his blood spilling into the wine he had so greedily consumed. The death of their leader momentarily stunned the other centaurs, but it only fueled the Lapiths' righteous anger. The brawl spilled out of the palace, into the courtyards and the surrounding town. The centaurs, now leaderless and disorganized, were driven back, not by superior strength, but by superior will. They fled the wedding feast, leaving their dead and wounded behind, a trail of carnage marking their chaotic retreat. But this was not the end. It was the beginning of the Great Centauromachi, the War of the Centaurs. The violation at the wedding feast was an unforgivable offense. It confirmed every fear the Lapiths had ever harbored about their wild neighbors. They were not just different, they were incompatible with the world of men. There could be no peace, no coexistence. And so the Lapiths swore an oath to purge their lands of the Centaur menace forever. The conflict transformed from a brawl into a campaign. It became a war of extermination. The Lapith warriors, now armed and organized under the command of Pirithous and Theseus, marched into the forests and mountains of Thessaly, the ancestral home of the Centaurs. Here, the Centaurs should have had the advantage. This was their territory, the tangled woods and rocky slopes their domain, but the fundamental imbalance remained. The Centaurs fought as a mob, a collection of individuals driven by rage and a desire for revenge. They had no strategy beyond the ambush and the frontal assault. The Lapiths, however, fought as an army. They had disciplined formations and brilliant leadership. They used fire to flush the centaurs from the forests. They set traps in the mountain passes. They used their knowledge of tactics to overcome the centaurs' brute force. This was the ultimate clash between two opposing forces. It was the organized, strategic violence of humanity against the chaotic, instinctual fury of the wild. Every centaur that fell was a victory for order. Every Lapith spear that found its mark was a nail in the coffin of the mythic age. They hunted them relentlessly, driving them from the caves where they had lived for generations, from the streams where they had watered their herds, from the shadow of Mount Pelion, which had been their sanctuary. The world was shrinking. The forests were no longer deep enough to hide in, the mountains no longer high enough to offer refuge. Even the wise Chiron, who had remained secluded in his own cave, far from the madness of his kin, was not immune to the fallout of this war. The conflict was a tide of violence that swept away everything in its path, making no distinction between the guilty and the innocent. The centaurs were being systematically erased from the landscape, their existence deemed a threat to the burgeoning age of man. The war was not just about territory or revenge anymore. It had become a philosophical battle, a referendum on what kind of world was going to emerge from the ashes of the mythic era. Would it be a world that still had room for the untamed, the monstrous, the half-formed things of chaos? Or would it be a world defined exclusively by the neat, orderly, and ruthless logic of humanity? The outcome of the Centauromachi would provide a brutal, definitive answer. The hoofbeats of the centaurs were growing fainter, drowned out by the marching feet of the armies of men. And so the great contest was set, not on a battlefield chosen by generals, but in the heart of civilization itself. This wasn't merely a war for territory, it was a war for definition, a struggle to decide which half of the centaur's nature would inherit the future. The rational, tool-wielding man, or the untamed, instinct-driven beast? The Greeks, as always, were obsessed with such questions, and in the story of the Centauromachy, the war against the Centaurs, they would explore this conflict in the most visceral way imaginable. The stage for this epic confrontation was, ironically, a wedding, a celebration of union, order, and the sacred bonds of society. The wedding of Pirithous, king of the Lapiths, to the beautiful Hippodamia. Now, the Lapiths were not strangers to the Centaurs. In fact, they were family. Pirithous and the Centaurs shared a common ancestor, Ixion, the man who had dared to lust after Hera herself. The Lapiths were the descendants of Ixion and his human wife, Diameter. The Centaurs were the monstrous offspring of Ixion and the cloud phantom, Nephili. They were, in essence, cousins. One branch of the family tree had embraced the laws of gods and men. The other had remained wild, a living memory of their father's chaotic, unchecked desires. Pirithous, in a gesture of kinship and perhaps a naive hope for reconciliation, invited his half-beast relatives to the wedding feast. It was a monumental event. The guest list was a who's who of the heroic age. The greatest warrior present wasn't even a Lapith, but Pirithous' dearest friend, a man who had traveled from Athens to stand by his side, the legendary hero Theseus, slayer of the Minotaur. The presence of Theseus was a powerful symbol. He was the champion of Athenian order, the man who had brought law and reason to the labyrinth's dark heart. His attendance at the wedding hall was like placing a seal of civilization upon the entire affair. The feast began under a banner of peace. The great hall in Thessaly was filled with music, laughter, and the scent of roasted meats and fine wines. The Lapith warriors, proud and disciplined, sat at long tables, celebrating their king. And among them, awkwardly, sat the Centaurs. For a time, an uneasy truce held. The Centaurs, unaccustomed to such refined settings, seemed to be on their best behavior. But there was one element of human culture they were utterly unprepared for: wine. To the Greeks, wine was a gift from the god Dionysus. It was a tool for social bonding, a key to unlocking deeper truths. But it was meant to be respected, diluted with water, and consumed with measure. The Centaurs knew nothing of this. They had only ever drunk water from mountain streams and raw milk. When the great bowls of unmixed wine were passed around, they drank it like water, their powerful equine bodies absorbing the potent alcohol with terrifying speed. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic. The thin veneer of civility evaporated. The raw, primal nature that lay dormant within them erupted to the surface. Their speech slurred into guttural roars. Their eyes, once filled with a wary curiosity, now burned with pure, unadulterated lust and aggression. The carefully constructed order of the wedding feast began to shatter. The breaking point came when the bride, Hippodamia, was presented to the guests. The Centaur leader, a brute named Eurytion, inflamed by the wine and his own savage impulses, saw her not as a queen or a kinswoman, but as a prize to be taken. With a roar that silenced the music, he leaped from his seat, overturned a table, and seized the bride, attempting to drag her away. It was more than an assault, it was a declaration of war. A rejection of every rule of hospitality, kinship, and law. It was the wild proclaiming its dominance over the civilized. In a heartbeat, every other centaur followed Eurytion's lead. They grabbed Lapith women, they seized serving girls, their drunken fury turning the wedding celebration into a scene of absolute chaos and terror. But they had forgotten about the heroes in the room. Before anyone else could react, Theseus was on his feet. He was a guest, an outsider, but his loyalty to his friend and his devotion to order were absolute. He intercepted Eurytion, not with a grand speech, but with the brutal efficiency of a seasoned warrior. He smashed a heavy ornate wine vessel, a crater, over the centaur's head, felling the beastman in a spray of blood and wine. The death of their leader did not quell the centaur's rage. It ignited it. The Centauromachy had begun. What followed was not a battle of organized armies, but a desperate, brutal brawl inside the confines of the wedding hall. There was no room for strategy, only for survival. The Lapiths, caught off guard, fought with whatever they could find. They wielded broken benches, table legs, and heavy bronze dinnerware. The Centaurs, with their immense strength and powerful hooves, were devastating at close quarters. They trampled men underfoot, their fists like hammers, their teeth and nails like those of wild animals. The air filled with the splintering of wood, the clash of metal, the screams of the abducted women, and the guttural war cries of the Centaurs. It was a maelstrom of violence, a microcosm of the eternal struggle. Pirithous fought like a man possessed, defending his new wife and his kingdom, his spear finding the heart of many a half-horse cousin. And in the thick of it all was Theseus, a bastion of human discipline amidst the chaos. He moved with a warrior's grace, his sword a blur, cutting down the rampaging beasts. He became the rallying point for the Lapith men, his very presence a reminder that this was a fight that could be won. One of the most remarkable figures in the fray was the Lapith warrior Centaurs. Centaurs had a secret. He had been born a woman, Canis. After being assaulted by the god Poseidon, she had demanded the sea god grant her one wish, to be transformed into a man, a warrior who could never be violated again. Poseidon agreed and granted him an additional gift, skin that was impervious to any blade or spear. Centaurs was an unstoppable force. He waded into the thickest knot of centaurs, his spear and sword deflecting off his impenetrable skin as he cut a bloody swath through their ranks. The centaurs, panicked by this seemingly invincible man, could not wound him. In their desperation, they resorted to a more primal form of attack. They swarmed him, using their collective weight and strength not to pierce his skin, but to bury him alive. They uprooted fir trees and piled massive rocks upon him, crushing him under the sheer weight of the wild earth itself, driving him down into the ground. It was a testament to his power that the only way nature could defeat him was to literally swallow him whole. Slowly, painfully, the tide of the battle began to turn. The Lapiths, though initially overwhelmed, had two key advantages. First, they were fighting with a clear purpose: to defend their homes, their families, their way of life. The Centaurs were fighting in a drunken, chaotic rage. Second, the Lapiths had discipline and strategy. As the brawl spilled out of the feasting hall and into the open, they began to coordinate, to form lines, to use their superior bronze weapons and shields with deadly effect against the Centaurs' improvised clubs and bare fists. The logic of humanity began to impose itself on the chaos of the beast. The wild charge of the Centaurs broke against the disciplined shield wall of the Lapiths. One by one, the drunken, raging creatures were cut down or forced to flee. Their primal fury was no match for the cold, organized violence of men. The battle was won. The remaining centaurs, sobered by terror and defeat, broke and fled, scattering into the mountains and forests of Thessaly. They were driven from their ancestral homeland, exiled. The wedding of Pirithous was saved, but the hall was a ruin, littered with the bodies of both Lapith and Centaur. Civilization had held the line. The Centauromachy became one of the defining myths of ancient Greece. It was carved into the metopes of the Parthenon in Athens, a permanent reminder to all of the triumph of Athenian reason over barbarian chaos. It was a story told to children, a lesson about the dangers of unchecked passion and the importance of law and order. Humanity had faced the beast within, the wild half of its own family tree, and had emerged victorious. But the victory was not without its questions. In casting out the centaurs, had humanity also cast out a vital part of itself? In the relentless pursuit of order, what wild, beautiful, and essential truths were being buried under the stone foundations of the city? The centaurs were defeated, scattered, and demonized. They became a universal symbol of the savage other, the brute to be conquered. But the story was not over. For among the scattered survivors, far from the battlefields and the judgment of men, there existed a different kind of centaur. One who had not attended the wedding. One who valued wisdom over wine, and teaching over terror. The world knew him as Chiron, and his existence would challenge everything the Greeks thought they knew about the untamable heart of the beast. He was born not from a drunken king's lust and a phantom cloud, but from a titan's power and an Oceanid's grace. His father was none other than Cronus, the mighty titan who ruled the cosmos before Zeus. His mother was the beautiful nymph Philyra. Theirs was a secret, forbidden affair. To hide his infidelity from his wife Rhea, the great Cronus transformed himself into a magnificent stallion. And from this union of god and nymph, of divine power and natural spirit, a child was born. But when Philyra laid eyes on her son, she screamed in horror. He was a monster, a creature of two natures, the torso and arms of a divine boy, fused to the powerful body of a horse. This was not the child she had imagined. Consumed by shame and revulsion, she abandoned her newborn son, begging the gods to change her form so she would never have to look upon him again. They granted her wish, transforming her into a linden tree. And so, Chiron's life began with the ultimate rejection, forsaken by the very mother who gave him life. But he was not left to perish on the mountainside. The gods saw the divine blood that flowed in his veins. He was taken in by Apollo, the radiant god of music, medicine, and prophecy, and his twin sister Artemis, the fierce goddess of the hunt. Under their tutelage, Chiron became the very embodiment of civilized knowledge and primal skill. From Apollo he learned the healing arts, the secrets of herbs and surgery, the power of music to soothe the soul, and the wisdom of prophecy. He learned to play the lyre with a skill that could calm wild beasts and move men to tears. From Artemis, he learned to track, to hunt, to read the signs of the forest, and to wield the bow with an archer's deadly precision. He was a paradox, a creature of the wild who possessed a mind more cultivated than any king, a beast who was more humane than most men. While his brethren, the descendants of Ixion, rampaged through the forests fueled by wine and rage, Chiron established a school in his cave on Mount Pelion, a sanctuary of learning that would shape the destiny of Greece. His list of students reads like a roll call of legends, the greatest heroes the ancient world would ever know. There was Asclepius, the future god of medicine. Chiron took the young boy and taught him everything Apollo had taught him, unlocking the secrets of life and death. Asclepius became a healer so profound he could not only mend any wound, but could even snatch souls from the clutches of Hades and bring the dead back to life, a skill that would ultimately earn him the fatal wrath of Zeus. There was Jason, the prince who was sent to Chiron as an infant to be hidden from his murderous uncle. Chiron raised him, training him in the ways of a leader, a warrior, and a king. He taught Jason how to navigate by the stars, how to command the respect of men, and how to face his fears. Every lesson was a stone laid in the foundation of the man who would one day lead the Argonauts on the most perilous voyage in history, the quest for the Golden Fleece. And then there was Achilles, the greatest warrior of them all. His father, King Peleus, brought the young boy to Chiron's mountain, knowing that only the wise centaur could forge his son into the weapon of destiny he was fated to become. Chiron's curriculum for Achilles was intense. He fed the boy on the entrails of lions and the marrow of bears to instill in him their courage and strength. He taught him to run with the speed of a deer, to fight with the ferocity of a wild boar. But Chiron's teaching went far beyond the spear and the sword. He taught Achilles medicine, how to tend to the wounds of his comrades on the battlefield. He taught him philosophy, to temper his warrior's rage with reason. And he taught him music, placing a lyre in his hands to teach him that true strength lay not just in a strong arm, but in a gentle heart. He wasn't just training a soldier. He was sculpting a complete man, a hero whose name would echo through eternity. Chiron was the great mentor, the ultimate teacher. His cave on Mount Pelion wasn't a dark, damp lair, but a center of enlightenment. He was the bridge between the untamed wilderness and the ordered world of humanity, between the raw power of the gods and the fragile potential of mortals. He represented a radical idea, that the beast within could be governed not by chains or cages, but by wisdom, discipline, and compassion. He proved that even from a form deemed monstrous, the greatest virtues could arise. He was the exception that didn't just prove the rule, he shattered it. He showed the Greeks that the line between man and beast was not one of anatomy, but of choice. But for all his wisdom and power, Chiron's story, like so many Greek tales, is ultimately a tragedy. And it would be another of his pupils, the mightiest of them all, who would unwittingly seal his fate. The hero Hercules was in the midst of his fourth labor, the capture of the Erymanthian boar. On his journey, he stopped to visit a fellow centaur named Pholus. In a gesture of hospitality, Pholus opened a special cask of wine, a vintage so sacred it belonged to all the centaurs collectively. The intoxicating aroma drifted from the cave and across the mountainside, reaching the nostrils of the other centaurs. Driven mad by the scent, they descended upon the cave in a drunken, violent mob, armed with rocks and fir trees. Hercules, the peerless warrior, leaped to defend himself and his host. He drew his bow and unleashed a volley of arrows. But these were no ordinary arrows. Years before, Hercules had slain the Lernaean Hydra, and had dipped his arrowheads in its venomous blood, a poison so virulent that a single drop was instantly fatal. The arrows flew true, and the crazed centaurs fell. In the chaos of the battle, the wise Chiron, who had heard the commotion and came to mediate, emerged from his own cave. At that exact moment, a wounded centaur stumbled past, and one of Hercules' arrows passed straight through him, lodging itself deep in Chiron's knee. Hercules rushed to his old master's side, horrified at what he had done. He pulled the arrow out, but the damage was done. The Hydra's poison coursed through the centaur's veins, bringing with it an agony beyond comprehension. And here the story takes its most tragic turn. Chiron, the greatest physician in the world, the master who taught Asclepius the art of healing, could find no cure for himself. The Hydra's venom was absolute, but worse, far worse, was the fact that Chiron was immortal. As the son of a Titan, he could not die. The poison could not kill him, it could only torture him. He was trapped, a being of infinite wisdom condemned to an eternity of excruciating, unrelenting pain. His days of teaching were over. His life of peaceful contemplation was shattered. All that remained was suffering. For years he endured this fate, until he could bear it no more. He needed an escape, and he found it in the suffering of another. Far away, the Titan Prometheus was chained to a rock in the Caucasus Mountains as punishment for giving fire to mankind. Every day, an eagle would descend and eat his liver, only for it to regrow overnight, renewing his torment. Zeus had decreed that Prometheus would only be freed if an immortal agreed to take his place in Tartarus, the underworld. Hearing this, Chiron saw his release. In a final profound act of compassion and self-sacrifice, he volunteered. He, the great teacher, offered to give up his immortality, to descend into the darkness of Hades, in order to end his own pain and to free the benefactor of humanity. Zeus himself was moved by this noble act. He could not let such a life of wisdom and sacrifice simply fade into nothingness. And so, as Chiron surrendered his final, immortal breath, Zeus lifted his spirit from the earth and placed him among the stars. There he became the constellation Sagittarius, the archer, his bow forever aimed at the heavens. A timeless, glittering monument to the wise and gentle centaur who taught heroes how to be men, and showed the world that the heart of a beast could hold the soul of a god. But for every star like Chiron, there was a shadow on the earth. A darker, more violent truth that defined the centaur in the minds of most ancient Greeks. This was the truth of the untamed beast, the wild impulse that lurks just beneath the skin of civilization. And nowhere is this terrifying nature more brutally displayed than in the legendary tale of the Centauromachy, the great war between the Centaurs and the Lapiths. It was supposed to be a day of celebration. Pirithous, the king of the Lapith people of Thessaly, was marrying the beautiful Hippodamia. It was a grand affair, a union meant to secure peace and prosperity. In a gesture of goodwill, Pirithous invited his half-human, half-horse cousins, the Centaurs, to the wedding feast. It was a risky move. The Lapiths were known for their civility and culture, the Centaurs for their wildness. But they were kin, after all, and hospitality was a sacred duty. The Centaurs arrived, and at first, things were cordial. They marveled at the lavish hall, the fine food, the joyous music. But then came the wine. For the Centaurs, who were used to drinking only water and milk from mountain streams, the potent, unmixed wine of the Greeks was a revelation, and a disaster. It lit a fire in their blood, awakening the raw, untamed animal within. The thin veneer of civility evaporated in the alcoholic haze. Their leader, a brute named Eurytion, laid his drunken eyes on the bride Hippodamia. In his intoxicated mind, all thoughts of honor, kinship, and hospitality vanished. He saw only something he wanted. With a savage roar, he lunged across the tables, seized the terrified bride, and tried to drag her away. It was the spark that ignited a powder keg. Seeing their leader's brazen act, the other centaurs went berserk. They were no longer guests. They were a rampaging herd. They overturned tables, smashed wine jars, and grabbed the Lapith women, their wild cries echoing through the once joyful hall. The wedding feast descended into a blood-soaked, chaotic brawl. But the Lapiths were not helpless. Among their guests was the legendary hero Theseus, king of Athens and best friend to Pirithous. Without hesitation, Theseus grabbed a heavy bronze wine bowl and smashed it over Eurytion's head, killing him instantly and freeing the bride. The battle was joined. What followed was not a war of organized armies, but a desperate primal struggle for survival. Swords and spears were drawn, but soon the fight devolved into something more savage. Men and centaurs tore at each other with their bare hands. They wielded whatever they could find as weapons: broken table legs, flaming torches from the walls, massive stone urns, even deer antlers that had been mounted as decorations. The centaurs fought with the fury of nature itself, their powerful hooves kicking and trampling, their strong arms crushing the life from Lapith warriors. They were a terrifying force, a whirlwind of muscle, hair, and unthinking violence. But the Lapiths, fighting for their homes, their families, and their very way of life, matched their fury with courage and strategy. One Lapith warrior, Senus, was a figure of legend. He had once been a woman, Canis, who, after being assaulted by the sea god Poseidon, was granted a wish. Her wish was to be transformed into a man, a warrior who could never again be harmed, and made invulnerable to any weapon. The centaurs swarmed him, but their swords and spears glanced harmlessly off his skin. Frustrated and enraged, they changed tactics. If they couldn't pierce him, they would bury him. They uprooted pine trees and piled massive rocks upon him, driving the invincible warrior down into the earth itself, suffocating him under the weight of the mountain. The battle raged, a brutal tableau of life and death. In the end, the discipline and reason of the Lapiths triumphed over the chaotic rage of the centaurs. The surviving beasts were driven from the hall, defeated and shamed, forced to flee Thessaly forever. This story, the Centauromachy, was more than just a myth of a wedding gone wrong. For the Greeks, it was a profound allegory. It was the ultimate story of the struggle between order and chaos, between civilization and barbarism. The Lapiths represented the Greek ideal: reason, law, self-control, and the sanctity of social customs like marriage and hospitality. The centaurs represented the opposite: lust, violence, instinct, and the wild, untamable forces of nature. Their inability to handle wine was symbolic of their lack of moderation, a core virtue in Greek philosophy. The battle wasn't just happening in a wedding hall in Thessaly. It was happening inside every human soul. It was the eternal conflict between our higher, rational selves and our lower bestial impulses. This theme was so powerful, so fundamental to the Greek worldview, that it became one of the most important subjects in all of Greek art. Most famously, the battle was carved in breathtaking detail into the marble metopes, the sculpted panels, of the Parthenon in Athens. Imagine, on the most sacred temple dedicated to Athena, the goddess of wisdom and warfare, the central story chosen to be displayed was this brutal fight. It was a permanent public declaration: this is who we are. We are the people who choose reason over chaos. We are the ones who tame the beast. The sculpture itself is a masterpiece of dynamic violence, with figures twisting, straining, and collapsing in a frozen moment of desperate conflict. The legacy of the Centauromachy galloped through the centuries. The Renaissance genius Michelangelo sketched his own version, a swirling vortex of nude bodies locked in combat called Battle of the Centaurs. Later, Peter Paul Rubens, the master of the Baroque, painted the abduction of Hippodamia, with explosive color and energy, capturing the sheer terror and chaos of that first moment of violence. The story became a timeless symbol, a way for artists to explore the darkest corners of human nature. But to paint all centaurs with this savage brush would be to ignore a more complex and tragic side of their story. Because the question inevitably arises: if there were male centaurs, were there also female centaurs? The answer is yes. They were known as the Centaurides. While they appear less frequently in the myths and art, their presence adds a crucial layer of depth to the centaur race. They weren't just a species of rampaging males. They were a people with families, and with the capacity for love and sorrow. The most poignant story of a female centaur comes from the Roman poet Ovid, in his epic work, The Metamorphoses. He tells the tale of Hylonomi, a beautiful centauride known for her grace and elegance. She was the wife of the handsome centaur Silurus. Their love was the stuff of legend. They were inseparable, hunting together in the mountains and resting together in the caves. Ovid describes them as a perfect pair, a vision of domestic peace amidst a wild existence. Tragically, Silurus and Hylonomi were both present at the fateful wedding of Pirithous. They fought side by side in the ensuing battle. In the chaos of the fight, a stray javelin struck Silurus, piercing him just below the neck, straight through the heart. Hylonomi rushed to his side. She held him as his life faded, trying to warm his cold limbs, pressing her lips to his to try and catch his fleeting soul. But it was no use. As Silurus died in her arms, Hylonomi was consumed by a grief so absolute, so devastating, that she could not imagine a world without him. In her despair, she took up the very same javelin that had killed her beloved, and threw herself upon it, joining him in death. This heartbreaking story reveals a profound truth. Even within the race defined by its wildness, there existed a capacity for the deepest and most human of emotions: love, loyalty, and unbearable grief. Hylonomy's tragedy shows us that the Centaurs were not a monolith of savagery. They were a complex people, capable of both monstrous violence and tender devotion. They were a mirror, reflecting not just the beast within humanity, but its capacity for love and sacrifice as well. The centaur was a creature of violent contradictions, a being forever caught between the wild earth and the thinking mind, between a warrior's rage and a lover's heart. And this savage duality, this impossible fusion of man and beast, is precisely what ensured the centaur would not die with the gods of Olympus. It galloped out of the ashes of ancient Greece and into the minds of future empires, each one seeing a different reflection in its hybrid form. The Romans, masters of assimilation, largely adopted the Greek centaur wholesale. They carved them onto sarcophagi, laid them in intricate mosaics on the floors of their villas, and retold their stories. To the pragmatic Roman mind, the centaur remained a potent symbol of the chaos that lurked just beyond the ordered, paved roads of the empire, a reminder of the barbarian forces that civilization must perpetually hold at bay. But as the Roman Empire crumbled and a new faith rose to dominate the West, the centaur underwent a profound and sinister transformation. In the world of medieval Christianity, there was little room for the nuances of a creature like Chiron. The pagan gods were demons, and their monstrous creations were manifestations of sin. The centaur, with its animalistic lower half, became a perfect emblem of humanity's base nature, of lust, violence, and unthinking appetite. The wild, drunken brawlers from the wedding of Pirithous became the dominant image, their chaotic energy now interpreted as the work of the devil. In the beautifully illustrated pages of medieval bestiaries, books that catalog both real and imagined animals, the centaur was often depicted as a treacherous and wild being. No longer a tutor to heroes, it was now a warning against giving in to carnal desire. The human torso, the seat of reason, was shown to be hopelessly dragged along by the powerful, lustful body of the horse. It was a living allegory for the soul's struggle against the flesh. This dark interpretation found its most terrifying expression in Dante Alighieri's Inferno. When Dante travels to the seventh circle of hell, the circle reserved for the violent, who does he find patrolling the river of boiling blood? Centaurs, led by Chiron himself, now reimagined not as a wise teacher but as a grim warden of hell. They gallop along the banks, armed with bows and arrows, firing upon any damned soul who dares to rise too high out of the scorching river. They had become eternal tormentors, their inherent violence repurposed for divine punishment. The centaur was no longer a creature caught between two worlds. It was now firmly a monster of the underworld, a symbol of righteous fury turned to eternal cruelty. Then came the Renaissance, the great rebirth of classical art and thought. As scholars unearthed ancient texts and artists studied the magnificent sculptures of Greece and Rome, the centaur was reborn as well. The stark, moralizing lens of the medieval church began to fade, and artists once again saw the centaur not just as a symbol of sin, but as a figure of immense power, passion, and tragic beauty. Look at Michelangelo's first known marble relief, Battle of the Centaurs. It is a swirling, chaotic masterpiece of muscle and motion. He doesn't portray them as simple monsters versus heroes. Instead, it's a raw, primal explosion of energy, a complex study of the human, and in human form in desperate conflict. The centaur was once again a subject worthy of the highest art, a way to explore the untamed, dynamic forces of nature and humanity itself. Botticelli, in his painting Pallas and the Centaur, presents a different, more philosophical vision. Here, the goddess of wisdom, Pallas Athena, gently takes the hair of a centaur, who looks back at her with a somber, almost submissive expression. It's a stunning allegory for wisdom taming instinct, of civilization calming the beast within, not through violence but through reason and grace. The duality was back, more complex and fascinating than ever. As the centuries wore on, the centaur receded from the realm of religious warning and entered the landscape of the imagination. During the Romantic era, it became a figure of nostalgia, a symbol of a lost, mythical past where humanity was one with the wild earth. But it was in the 20th and 21st centuries that the centaur would find its most remarkable new home, the world of modern fantasy. And here something incredible happened. The archetype of the wise Chiron, so long suppressed, came roaring back to prominence. In C.S. Lewis's The Chronicles of Narnia, the Centaurs are not wild beasts. They are among the wisest, noblest, and most honorable creatures in the land. They are stargazers, prophets, healers, and formidable warriors for justice. Lewis completely inverted the medieval trope, casting his centaurs as paragons of integrity, where the fusion of man and horse symbolized a perfect harmony of intellect and natural strength. They were a race you could trust, a race you would want on your side in the final battle between good and evil. Decades later, J.K. Rowling introduced a new generation to centaurs in the Harry Potter series. Her centaurs, living in the Forbidden Forest, are a proud, reclusive, and fiercely intelligent society. Like their Narnian cousins, they are masters of divination, reading the future in the movement of the stars. But Rowling added a layer of profound tension. Her centaurs are deeply suspicious of humans or two-legs, seeing their affairs as a distraction from the grander cosmic movements. They are a people caught between worlds in a new way, not between man and beast, but between the earth and the heavens, possessing a wisdom so vast it alienates them from those they share the world with. This rehabilitation has echoed across pop culture. In video games from World of Warcraft to God of War, and in the vast lore of tabletop games like Dungeons & Dragons, centaurs are now more often depicted as a unique civilization. They are a proud tribal people with their own culture, their own codes of honor, and their own place in the world. They can be allies or enemies, but they are rarely, if ever, portrayed as the simple drunken monsters of Greek myth. From a symbol of uncontrollable lust to a warden of hell, from a subject of high art to a noble prophet of the stars, the centaur has galloped through 3,000 years of human culture, changing its form and meaning with every era it enters. It has been a monster, a metaphor, and a hero. The creature itself is an impossibility of biology, a fantasy that could never walk the earth. And yet, it has proven to be one of the most durable and adaptable myths humanity has ever created. It has survived the fall of empires, the birth of new religions, and the dawn of the scientific age. Which leads to the ultimate question: why? Why has this specific creature, this fusion of human and horse, held such a powerful grip on our collective imagination for so long? What deep fundamental truth about our own nature does the centaur reflect, that we keep returning to it, retelling its story, and reshaping its meaning age after age? The answer goes to the very core of what it means to be human, a creature of contradictions, forever struggling with the beast within. This eternal conflict is the engine of the human story. It's the tension between the prefrontal cortex, the seat of reason and long-term planning, and the ancient limbic brain, the home of raw emotion, instinct, and survival. The Greeks, with their unparalleled genius for metaphor, gave this internal war a physical form. They gave it hooves, a tail, and the untamed heart of a wild stallion, fused to the torso of a thinking, speaking man. The centaur is not a monster from a distant land. It is a portrait of the monster and the hero that reside within us all. It is the embodiment of our dual nature, the living paradox of being a creature of spirit, tethered to a body of flesh and blood. Every one of us has a wild, untamed wilderness inside, a place of instinct, passion, and raw power. And every one of us has a civilizing force, a voice of reason that seeks to build, to understand, to create order from chaos. The centaur forces us to ask, which part is in control? Think of the myth of the Centauromachy, the epic battle at the wedding of Pirithous. On the surface, it's a story of civilized men, the Lapiths defending their honor against drunken, brutish beasts. But look deeper. It's an allegory for the constant, precarious struggle to maintain civility in the face of our own primal urges. The wine doesn't create the centaur's lust and violence. It simply unshackles it. It removes the thin veneer of control, revealing the beast that was always lurking just beneath the surface. This is a profoundly human fear, the fear of losing control, of our own passions overwhelming our better judgment, of the animal inside breaking free and destroying everything we've built. The Lapiths aren't just fighting centaurs. They are fighting an externalized version of their own potential for chaos. They are fighting the shadow self. This is why the figure of Chiron is so absolutely critical to the entire mythology. If all centaurs were like the ones at the wedding, the story would be a simple one, a cautionary tale about the dangers of barbarism. But Chiron shatters that simplicity. He is the other side of the coin, the proof that the beast within does not have to be a curse. It can be a source of profound strength and wisdom. Chiron represents the successful integration of our dual natures. He doesn't deny his animal half, he masters it. His horse body doesn't drag him down into mindless instinct. It connects him to the earth, to the secrets of nature, to a wisdom that pure intellect can never grasp. He channels its strength and endurance, not into destruction, but into teaching and healing. He is the ultimate symbol of self-mastery. He demonstrates that true wisdom isn't about eradicating our primal nature, but about understanding it, respecting it, and harnessing its power for a higher purpose. The goal isn't to kill the horse, it's to become a masterful rider. And this ancient struggle has galloped unbroken into our modern imagination. The centaur is not a relic, it is a recurring dream. Look at its role in modern fantasy, a genre dedicated to exploring the archetypes of the human psyche. In C.S. Lewis's Narnia, the centaurs are not wild brutes, but noble prophets and formidable warriors. They are stargazers and healers, possessing a wisdom that is both ancient and profound. They are respected, even revered, embodying a perfect union of physical power and intellectual grace. They are the descendants of Chiron, a vision of what humanity could be if it reconciled its inner conflict. Or consider the centaurs in J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter series. They are a proud territorial herd, deeply connected to the magic of the Forbidden Forest and the movements of the stars. They are fierce, standoffish, and view the concerns of humans, the foals, as they call them, with a kind of detached pity. Here, the centaur represents a different kind of wisdom, a naturalistic wisdom, separate from and often superior to human civilization. They are a reminder that there are older, wilder magics in the world, and that our human-centric view is a form of blindness. They are the untamed wilderness given a voice that warns us against our own arrogance. They are not our enemies, but they are not our servants. They are a force of nature we must learn to respect. From the battlefields of Dungeons and Dragons, where they are often portrayed as proud, nomadic warriors, to the digital landscapes of video games like God of War or the Elder Scrolls, the centaur continues to be a potent symbol. It's a ready-made icon of strength, freedom, and the wild. But it's more than just a cool monster to fight or a character class to play. Its persistence reveals our own deep-seated fascination with the line between man and beast. We are the only animal that is aware of its own animalism, and this creates a constant internal friction. The centaur is the ultimate expression of that friction. The creature's legacy is a testament to the power of myth. The Greeks didn't just invent monsters, they invented psychological tools. The Minotaur in the labyrinth represents the monster we create and hide in the depths of our own minds. The sirens represent the deadly pull of temptation that can dash our ambitions on the rocks. And the centaur represents the most intimate battle of all. The one fought not on a battlefield or a wine-soaked wedding feast, but within the confines of our own skin, every single day. It is the struggle between impulse and intention, the desire for immediate gratification versus the pursuit of a long-term goal, the flash of rage versus the calm of reason, the pull of instinct versus the call of conscience. This is the centaur's war, and it is our war. We see its untamed form and we recognize, with a shudder of familiarity, the wildness in our own hearts. We see Chiron, the wise teacher, and we recognize our own aspiration for self-control and enlightenment. The centaur, born from a phantom cloud and the hubris of a king, has outlived the gods of Olympus and the empires that worshipped them. It has survived because the question it embodies is eternal. It is a creature of the threshold, forever caught between two worlds, and in doing so it holds up a mirror to us, the ultimate threshold creatures. We, who have the minds of angels and the bodies of animals. We, who can write poetry and wage war, who can dream of the stars and yet are bound to the dust of the earth. The story of the centaur is not over. It will be retold as long as humans struggle with their own nature. It will be reimagined by every new generation that looks inside itself and finds both a philosopher and a wild beast staring back. The myth is not a history lesson. It is a living diagnosis of the human condition. It reminds us that our greatest challenge and our greatest potential lie in the fusion of our two halves. Not in the victory of one over the other, but in the difficult, lifelong, and noble quest to create a harmonious whole. The hoofbeats of the centaur do not echo in the forgotten mountains of ancient Greece. They echo in the chambers of our own hearts. The question is, and always has been, which part of you holds the reins?